Throughout ancient Chinese history, there was a profoundly bizarre and exceptionally bloody era. In just over half a century, the Central Plains saw 5 dynasties rise and fall, like a revolving lantern, while over a dozen regional regimes fleetingly took the stage. It was a dark, dog-eat-dog age, defined by the belief that emperors aren't born. They are just made by those. With the strongest armies, warlords clashed incessantly, and military coups were commonplace. A new emperor would often ascend the throne, stepping over the fresh blood of his recently slain predecessor, treating human life as entirely worthless. However, just as the Central Plains were on the verge of being torn apart by endless internal friction, a formidable figure finally emerged. Instead of wielding a butcher's knife to annihilate his rivals, employed masterful, almost bloodless political maneuvering to end this absurd era, ushering in the unprecedented economic and cultural prosperity of the great Song dynasty. This man is the protagonist of today's video. The founding emperor of the Song dynasty, Emperor Taizu, Zhao Kuangyin. Zhao Kuangyin, courtesy name, Yuanlang, was born into a traditional military family. During the 5 dynasties and 10 kingdoms, period swords dictated the rules. Zhao practiced martial arts early on, becoming highly skilled in archery and horsemanship. In his early years, he wandered in search of a future, at one point becoming so impoverished he had to take refuge in a temple. But true gold always shines, and he eventually joined the ranks of Guo Wei. He was the mighty Emperor Taizu of later Zhou. Later, serving under Emperor Shizong of Zhou Chairong, Zhao performed exceptionally well. Rising from a low-ranking officer, he fought his way through brutal, bloody conflicts. He finally reached the core position of Supreme Commander of the Palace Command. He was not only a fierce and capable warrior, leaving behind a martial arts lineage, known as Taizu Long Fist for later generations. He was also a top-tier political master with a profound understanding of human nature. Despite emerging from the mountains of corpses and seas of blood, typical of troubled times, he remarkably became one of the most humane and least bloodthirsty founding emperors in Chinese history. While military might is essential for establishing a regime, consolidating it requires strong institutions and a grand strategic vision. Zhao Kuangyin's life was marked by 2 core achievements: pacifying the realm through force and reinventing the empire's institutional framework. His first major milestone was donning the imperial yellow robe and finally founding the Song dynasty. On New Year's Day in 960, the later Zhou court received urgent border reports, claiming a massive joint invasion by the Khitan and Northern Han forces. Emperor Shizong Chairong had recently passed away, leaving behind a 7-year-old child, emperor, and his widowed mother. In their panic, they immediately appointed Zhao Kuangyin to lead the army north to defend the nation. When the troops reached Chenqiao station, outside the capital city of Bianjing, a mutiny broke out that would profoundly alter the course of Chinese history. The soldiers draped a prepared yellow robe over a drunk Zhao Kuangyin, hailing him as the brand new emperor. This event became famously known as the Mutiny at Chenqiao. Accepting the throne, Zhao established uncompromising military regulations. Upon returning to Bianjing, the army was strictly forbidden from harassing the royal family. They couldn't disturb the markets or plunder the treasuries. Thanks to this strict discipline, this dynastic transition didn't shed a drop of blood. The citizens of Bianjing even opened their shops for business. Proceeding as usual the very next day, through exceptionally peaceful means, Zhao completed the transfer of power, and he proudly named his new dynasty Song. His second major step was unifying the fragmented nation. He utilized a south-first, north-later strategy. At the dawn of the Song dynasty, the land was still divided. South was home to wealthy regional regimes, like Southern Tang, later Shu, Southern Han, while the north was dominated by the fierce Northern Han and the powerful Khitan. Facing this complex strategic landscape, Zhao demonstrated immense strategic composure. He adopted a policy of tackling the easier targets first, focusing on the south before moving to the north. Through a brutal series of overwhelming military campaigns, he successively conquered Jingnian, Wuping, later Shu, southern Han, and southern Tang. This incorporated the vast territories and immense wealth of the south into his domain. It also secured a rock-solid economic foundation for the Great Song dynasty. Finally, He fundamentally restructured the empire's power dynamics by strengthening the trunk and weakening the branches. Zhao Kuangyin profoundly understood the root cause of the chaos. It was during the 5 dynasties and 10 kingdoms. It was the excessive power held by regional military governors, a situation where the periphery was stronger than the center. To completely break the vicious cycle of military coups, he implemented a series of radical institutional reforms. He centralized all local military, financial, and administrative powers directly under the imperial court. He separated the authority to deploy troops from the authority to command them by establishing the Privy Council and 3 agencies to jointly manage the imperial guard. Furthermore, he launched a massive expansion of the imperial examination system, heavily relying on civil officials to govern the nation. This comprehensive approach effectively ended the 2-century-long era of warlord separatism that had plagued the land since the Lushan rebellion in the Tang dynasty, achieving a complete overhaul of the empire's power structure. To truly appreciate the depths of Zhao Kuangyin's ingenuity, one must examine 2 highly dramatic anecdotes from his life. These 2 stories, one civil, one military, one macro, one micro, both of them perfectly illustrate his imperial mindset. The first is the famous Snowy Night visit to Jiaopu, late one freezing, snowy night in the capital. During the first year of the Jianlong era, Jiaopu, the prime minister and the emperor's chief strategist, was preparing for bed. Suddenly, he heard urgent knocking at his door. Opening it, he broke out in a cold sweat. Standing in the driving snow was Emperor Zhao Kuangyin, dressed in plain clothes. Smiling, the emperor suggested they go see his younger brother, Zhao Guangyi. Soon after, the 3 most powerful men in the empire were sitting around a stove, like ordinary citizens, roasting meat, drinking wine, and discussing the fate of the realm. Zhao Kuangyin posed the central question. Since the world was still divided, what about attacking Yuzhou first? Poking at the charcoal, Zhao Pu calmly replied. While Yuzhou was crucial, the Khitan forces in the north were formidable. If they decided to attack the north first, the southern warlords would inevitably stab them in the back. He argued it was much better to target the south first. The southern regimes were wealthy but possessed weak armies. This made them incredibly easy to conquer. Once the south was finally and fully secured, they could use its financial and agricultural resources to fuel a concentrated northern expedition, thus settling the realm. Zhao Kuangyin laughed heartily, revealing that this was exactly his own thought, and that he had come solely to validate his idea. This informal meeting in the snow established the grand blueprint, the blueprint for finally unifying the entire empire. It also showcased his pragmatic, decisive, and thoughtful leadership style, cementing his role as the ultimate supreme commander. The second anecdote involves the gentlest yet most brilliant consolidation of power in Chinese history, relieving the generals of command with a simple cup of wine. Having conquered the empire, the next challenge was dividing the spoils. The old brothers in arms who risked their lives to drape the yellow robe over him at Chenqiao station now held massive military power, plagued by insomnia. Zhao Kuangyin feared the exact same mutiny could happen. It could one day happen to his generals or his descendants. Therefore, on a beautiful day, the emperor hosted a banquet in the palace, inviting senior commanders like Shou Shouxin, Wang Shengqi to drink. After a few rounds, when everyone was in high spirits, Zhao suddenly dismissed the attendants and sighed deeply. He confessed that without them, he would never have become emperor, but now on the throne, he was so consumed by anxiety he couldn't sleep. Noting that being a regional governor was far happier, the startled generals immediately dropped their cups and asked why. With a piercing gaze, Zhao Kuangyin uttered his famous words. Who, in this world, doesn't want to be emperor? Terrified, the generals dropped to their knees, begging for their lives, insisting that no one would dare harbor treasonous thoughts, especially now that the realm was finally settled. Zhao Kuangyin gently countered that they might not have disloyal intentions, but if their subordinates were lured by wealth and forced a yellow robe upon them, could they really control their own fate? This struck like a thunderbolt, and the weeping generals begged for a way out. Zhao then proposed his solution, noting that life is short. People seek only to accumulate wealth for their descendants. Suggested they surrender their military commands in exchange for comfortable civilian posts. In return, he would grant them vast estates and wealth, and they could even arrange marriages between their families. This way, mutual suspicion would vanish and everyone could live in peace. The very next day, Shishu and the other generals claimed illness, and they voluntarily relinquished all of their military authority. There were no massacres and absolutely no blood-soaked purges, and no cruel executions of loyal hounds once the hunt was over. With just a banquet, a frank conversation, and an exchange of wealth for power, Zhao Kuangyin effortlessly disarmed his generals and completely neutralized the empire's deadliest internal threat. This masterstroke of political wisdom remains unparalleled among founding emperors. History is both a mirror and a double-edged sword. How should we evaluate Emperor Taizu of Song? In terms of personal ability and moral character, Zhao Kuangyin undoubtedly ranks among the absolute greatest emperors in Chinese history. He brought an end to over 70 years of warlord strife and immense human suffering during the 5 dynasties and 10 kingdoms period, allowing the dawn of peace and unity to shine upon the land once more. His foundational policy of exalting civil governance over military might directly catalyzed 300 years of cultural and economic splendor. It was a splendor that completely defined the Song dynasty. Renowned historian Chenqiao once noted that the cultural evolution of the Chinese nation reached its absolute zenith during the long reign of the Song dynasty. The bedrock for all of this was completely laid by Zhao Kuangyin. Even more admirable was his magnanimity and moral bottom line. While most founding emperors resorted to bloody purges of former royal families and purged meritorious officials, Zhao Kuangyin simply did not. He treated the descendants of the later Zhou family very well, granting them an iron plaque to guarantee their generational wealth and safety. He also erected a secret Taizu oath stele in the imperial ancestral temple. This stele mandated that every subsequent Song emperor swear a secret oath, an oath upon ascending the throne, never to execute the Chai family descendants, and never to execute scholar officials or those who submitted petitions. This was not only a profound respect for human life, but an exceedingly rare high watermark of political civilization in China's feudal history. However, viewed through a much broader historical lens, Zhao Kuangyin's institutional designs also planted fatal hidden dangers for the great Song dynasty. In his zeal to prevent internal military rebellions, he built the firewall of power way too high. By draining local military and financial resources, he created an army where soldiers didn't know their generals, and those generals had absolutely no idea who their soldiers were. Consequently, the Song military remained at a chronic disadvantage, struggling against the cavalry of northern nomadic tribes. He cured Chinese history of its internal warlord syndrome, but in doing so, he stripped the empire of its aggressive, expansionist drive and completely removed its immunity against foreign invasions, ultimately paving the way for the tragic Jingkang incident and the catastrophic Battle of Yamen. Despite all of this, Zhao Kuangyin remains a truly great monarch. Through a lifetime of strategic brilliance and military conquest, he proved that power doesn't have to be consolidated with blood, and that peace and prosperity are never truly out of reach. He wasn't merely a god of war who forged a massive empire, but a masterful chess player who deeply understood human nature, and he always left a way out. This concludes today's video. If you have different perspectives on this legendary founding emperor, feel free to share them in the comments, and we'll see you next time.